بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah, in the last session we already studied the text by Allama Hadi, rahmatullah alayh, in which he explained Burhanul Wujub wal Imkan, cosmological argument for the existence of God. So we already explained everything and you know it. What we are going to do in this session is to explain it further, just to expand the explanation according to what Fadil Miqdad rahmatullah alayh has said. But basically, he's just, expanding what Allama Hadi said. There is nothing new for you. So today, mostly, you deepen your understanding of the text. قال page 20 ولا شك, in the second half of the page, ولا شك قال ولا شك في أن هنا موجودا. Allama Hadi rahmatullah alayhi said there is no doubt that there exists some type of being. There are some beings. Okay? Because the argument started like this. We said there is no doubt that there are some realities. These realities are either wajib or mumkin. If it's wajib, no problem. Alhamdulillah, that's God. If there are mumkin, then we say that mumkin needs originator, and we talk about that originator. Yeah, you remember all this. So, this was the kalam, the word of Allama Hadi. Aqulu. Fadil Miqdad rahmatullah alayhi says, I say. This is in order to distinguish between the main text and the commentary. أقول للعلماء كافة. كافة we have in the Quran also. وما أرسلناك إلا للناس كافة. كافة means all. للعلماء, for scholars, كافة, all of them. في إثبات الصانع طريقان. There are two ways to argue for the existence of creator. Ithbat means to prove, to argue for Sana, existence of creator. Sana is creator. Of course, maybe some people say there are more than two ways, but basically in Kalam, normally they follow one of these two ways. One is through effects, athar. You look at athar and then argue for the existence of mu'athir. You look at the effects and you say there must be a cause. You look at camel and say this camel cannot be created by chance or accident. أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Or فَانْظُرُوا إِلَى آثَارِ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Okay, so you look at the things which are created and you say these must be created by God. Which is what we call it Burhan al-Nazm, argument from design. Okay? Or something similar to that. So, here our mind moves from athar to God. Okay? From athar to God. And the reason for this is, for most of people, for maybe 99% of people, athar are more familiar than God himself. I see the camel, I see the mountain, I see the ocean, but unfortunately we don't see God. So we argue from the existence of these athar for the existence of God. Because for most of people, these are more familiar. Okay?
So by author, do you mean creation?
Creation, effects, these are things that are created. So, he says, Al-awwal huwa al-istidlalu bi-atharihi. You reason or you argue, istidlal means reasoning, arguing. You reason or you argue bi-atharihi, from his effects, his creatures. Al-muhwajati ila sabab. And these athar, they need cause. So, looking at these athar, you realize that there must be a cause, because these are by themselves dependent, these are mumkin, these are faqir, needy. So you look at athar, and then you argue from these athar for what? Ala wujudihi. You argue for the existence of Creator. So al-istidlal bi-atharihi, al-muhwaja means what makes them needy, ila sabab makes them need cause, ala wujudihi, for the existence of God. Istidlal, because you use something as the basis of istidlal, and then you want to prove something. We say al-istidlalu bi-ala, bil-athar, ala wujud al-sani. Is it clear?
Yes.
Because in Arabic, jar and majroor are very important. Without knowing jar and majroor, you cannot analyze Arabic sentences. Jar and majroor are very, very important. And so many subtle points you can understand from jar and majroor. The same verb, with one jar and majroor means something, with another mean something else. هو الاستدلال بآثاره المحوجة إلى السبب على وجوده. الاستدلال على وجوده. I repeat so that you will fully understand. If you don't understand, ask me please. Okay? كما أشار إليه في الكتاب العزيز. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has done ishara, means hinted, indicated, hinted, pointed to this istidlal. إليه means istidlal, to this argument. في الكتاب العزيز. What does aziz mean? Pardon? As if you remember in the discussion about tahrif and also in akhlaq series, we had this ayah, إنه لكتاب عزيز لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ولا من خلفه. This ayah is very important. Do you remember why I mentioned this ayah is very important? Pardon?
It doesn't penetrate.
Yeah, but I used it especially for something.
Authenticity of Quran.
Pardon?
Authenticity of Quran.
It proves
Quran doesn't accept anything.
Yes, but
it proves that haqq is more important than, or more superior to izzah.
yes. You know, we had discussion about izzah, honor, and then we had discussion about karama. And I said I was looking for a way to connect Izza and Haq. And this ayah, it helped me a lot. إِنَّهُ لَكِتَابٌ عَزِيزٌ لَا يَأْتِيهِ الْبَاطِلُ. Why it is Aziz? Because it's based on the truth. It's Haq. Batil cannot come to this. So this ayah is what we had it in the beginning of Akhlaq this year. And also we had it in Tahrif al-Quran, discussion about Tahrif al-Quran. So, Al-Kitab al-Aziz refers to this ayah, the book which is dignified or mighty or strong. Nothing can penetrate it. Okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has pointed to this argument بِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى with this ayah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم. This ayah is mentioned also in self-knowledge. سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم. We will soon show them our signs in horizons and in themselves, in their souls or in themselves. This shows to two types of signs. There are external signs of Allah that you find it around, and there are signs for Allah inside us. And this is why ma'rifatun nafs is important. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ till it becomes clear for them أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ that truly He is the truth for the truth. Haq can be truth or truth. So these ayat are the same as athar. So this ayah is saying that by showing people athar and signs, ayat, people can realize that God is haq. Okay? Very, inshallah, clear. وَهُوَ طَرِيقُ إِبْرَاهِيمِ الْخَلِيلِ عَلَى نَبِيِّنَا وَآلِهِ وَعَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. Okay? Ibrahim, who was given the position of Khalil. We are not saying for himself, but at least for people, he used this. فَإِنَّهُ استدل بالأفول. Ibrahim alayhi salam, the story in the Quran, because at that time there were star worshippers, moon worshippers, sun worshippers. Okay? So Ibrahim alayhi salam tried to show that these cannot be the creator of this world. This cannot be our Lord. We should not worship them. Okay? How did he do this? In a program, we had interface program, I explained that maybe this is my understanding. Ibrahim alayhi salam didn't say, just these are false. He said, Hada Rabbi, this star is my Lord. When it set, it declined, said, I don't like a God who sets. Then moon, then sun. And the way I understood it, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought this doesn't mean that he believed in them, definitely. But he wanted to engage with those people. Okay? So he wanted to be understanding and putting himself in their shoes. What are the advantages and disadvantages? So, pardon?
You wanted to show them their face, maybe.
Yes. So he went as if inside their camp and circle and said, Hada Rabbi, Okay? And then he said, but no. Although I try to accept this, it doesn't, make sense. So this is maybe a way of saying what he did. Anyway, Ibrahim alayhi salam used signs of God to prove that there must be God. So, فَإِنَّهُ اسْتَدَلَّ بِالْأُفُولِ. Uful means to decline, to set. Okay? Opposite to tolu. Tolu, to rise. Uful. Even today we use uful for decline of civilization. We say uful. Means to decline, they go into decline. Istadalla bil uful. Ibrahim alayhi salam argued from uful. What is uful? Alladhi huwa al-ghaybah. Uful means to disappear. Ghayba means to disappear. Because when a star sets, you cannot see it. Okay? So, istadalla bil uful alladhi huwa al-ghaybah. And ghayba is al-mustalzima lil-haraka. Ghayba requires movement. Because why something disappears? There is movement. There is change. And change is a sign of huduth. So al-ghayba implies haraka. Haraka implies huduth. What is huduth?
Limitation.
To be created. Not to be there and then come into existence. Huduth means to be preceded by Adam, to be preceded by non-existence. Hadith and qadim. So, when something goes to decline and sets, this shows that it was clear, it was visible, that it disappeared. This shows that there was movement. Movement is for something which is created. Because, do you know why movement is for something which is created? Why something which is eternal doesn't move?
Because it's not
implies limit.
Pardon?
If it were to move, it implies it was limited.
So what's the problem?
It was limited and it is
It's not perfect. Going from
No, eternal can be imperfect. Eternal like farishte, angels. They are qadim, but not wajib.
Going from A to B implies there's space, and space is a creation itself.
A movement doesn't need to be in space. Movement can be in quality and other things. This is what you, inshallah, study more later, and also especially in philosophy.
I think in movement it means that they move from one place to the other. It means they're limited in the space in where they stay.
Yeah. Movement can be in a space, movement can be in other things. There are 4 categories in which movement can take place, and then Allah Sadra proved that actually even in substance movement can take place. But before Mullah Sadra, they used to say movement can be in a space, in time, in Kam, and in Kayf. In 4 categories, but Mullah Sadra said even in Jawha. Anyway,
Can you repeat them quickly?
no, there is no need. Just wait, inshallah time comes. Just for the time being, imagine if something is what was eternal. What does it mean? It means that it has always been there. So something which has always been there must have finished every change that was needed. Why something is changing? Because there is limit and there is time impact on it. If something has been there forever, so there should be no waiting. There should be no future, no tomorrow or today for it. It doesn't make sense.
Yes, indeed.
The only things which are changeable are the things which are existent for a period of time. If something has always been there, so it is beyond the time, it's beyond the change. Anyway, al-haraka is, yes.
I don't know but something is beyond time, beyond change. Is this we conclude rationally through our own
Yes.
intellect?
Yes, we can understand that there are things which are changeable and there are things which are not changeable. But how many things are like that? We don't understand it by reason. We can understand from, for example, Quran, from Hadith, other things.
Yes.
You cannot, for example, understand by your reason how many types of angels are there. We don't understand. But we know that contingent beings can be changeable and unchangeable. And the reason for this is to be able to explain the way changeable things connect to God. So our connection to God is through unchangeable contingent beings. Okay? So, but you don't need to know these things right now. Inshallah, in future, you will learn these things. Haraka, movement, requires huduth. Anything which moves means it's changing. Inshallah, again, you will learn that haraka is gradual movement, gradual change. Because there are two types of change. In philosophy, they tell us there are two types of change. One type of change is called kawn and fasad. Kawn and fasad. Kawn and fasad means being and corruption. Kawn and fasad. Sometimes changes happen suddenly. Kawn and fasad. For example, when someone hits the wall, okay? If someone hits the wall, I am preparing you for next year, when inshallah we study philosophy. So when someone hits the wall, his movement towards wall is haraka, is gradually taking place. But hitting the wall, does it happen gradually or at once? At once. Because either he has hit the wall or not. You cannot say gradually he has hit the wall. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So moving towards wall is haraka, but hitting the wall is not haraka. Okay? And sometimes we use harakat waz'i, harakat tariqi, harakat qat'i to distinguish between these two types of change. And sometimes it's not related to haraka at all, whether it would be moving towards the wall or hitting the wall. Like, for example, if for example, if apple is gradually growing, this is movement. Okay? The color changes, the taste changes, okay? But if this apple is, for example, burnt, or if this apple is eaten, then this is not haraka. This is a sudden change. It's not a gradual change. If it happens, of course, suddenly. Like, for example, maybe an animal comes and takes it. So the gradual process of growing stops suddenly. Or maybe, for example, death is the same. Death is also not something that happens gradually. You cannot say, this person has died 60%, then 40%, then 10%. Yes? This happens at once. You can say he's getting nearer and nearer and nearer to death, but you cannot say he's gradually dying. Technically, he dies immediately. Anyway, haraka should be tadriji, but kawn and fasad is not tadriji. So, the first type of argument is to refer to the signs of God, to the things that are created by God, and argue for the existence of God, like what Ibrahim alayhi salam did. Okay? To this extent it's clear. Inshallah we will study more in philosophy. And actually, one of the most difficult discussions in philosophy is the discussion about harakat, movement, and zaman, time. Ayatollah Mutahari, when he was writing commentary on Usul Falsafa wa Ravish Ra'alism, he made commentary on all the parts of this book by Allama Tabatabai, but when he reached harakat, he stopped. So he took Allama Tabatabai to Tehran for some time, stayed in his, asked Allama to stay with him, and he wanted to discuss more with him to finish this. This is a very difficult part of philosophy, harakat and zaman. Athani, the second type of argument. This is actually what Allama Hilli has done. And that is, instead of looking at the signs and arguing from signs for the existence of God, start directly with the concept of existence, with the concept of wujud. And we say then wujud is either mumkin or wajib, and if it is wajib, so that's God. If it is mumkin, then mumkin has to be created by either wajib or another mumkin. If it is wajib, it's okay. If another mumkin, then finally we have to reach wajib. Otherwise it will be door and tasalsul. So this argument starts directly with the concept of existence. Have you studied Introduction to Philosophy, Logical Philosophy? None of you? Okay. So there you find that some people thought this is Burhan al-Siddiqin. This is the argument of Siddiqin, which is most truthful people. Because this starts not with the effects, but with God. But then other people said no, even this doesn't stop first with God. It starts with wujud, and wujud can be wajib and can be mumkin. So they developed another version of Burhan al-Siddiqin, which is something that Mullah Sadra and then Allama Tabatabai, developed. So if you sometimes see in the books Burhan al-Siddiqin for the existence of God, they want to have something which does not start with anything other than God. They want to start the argument from God and prove the existence of God. So, الثاني هو أن ينظر في الوجود نفسه. Nazar, we had nazar. You remember nazar? What is nazar?
Look deeply.
Look deeply at something. أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل. We said talaba should always do nazar. Yeah? Look deeply and carefully at things. Okay? هو أن ينظر في الوجود. This argument, the second type, is to be looked carefully at existence itself. فالوجود نفسه يعني نفس الوجود. You don't start with آثار, you start with the concept of وجود. Okay? أن ينظر في الوجود نفسه. Please show that you understood.
Yes,
You understand?
yes, it's very good.
ويقسم إلى الواجب والممكن.
What you have done actually so far.
It's clear, yeah?
Yes,
It's because if I don't understand, I have to slow and repeat. If you understand, then يقسم إلى الواجب والممكن. So we start with wujud itself. Then we say wujud is divided. يقسم, تقسيم means what? To divide, to classify, yeah? Categorize. يقسم إلى الواجب والممكن. We say, we start with wujud. Wujud is divided into wajib and mumkin. حتى يشهد القسمة بوجود واجب. We start with this division till This division bears witness of that wajib must exist. Because we say it's either wajib or mumkin. If it is wajib, okay. If it is mumkin, then we move to the mumkin. We say this mumkin is created by what? Wajib or mumkin? If it is wajib, okay. If it is mumkin, finally is door and tasalsul, batil, so wajib. Yes? يشهد القسم بوجود واجب صدر عنه, existence of wajib which sadara anhu is issued from him. What is issued? Jami'u ma ada. Everything other than wajib, it's issued. You know, sudur means to be issued, means to be created. Everything is issued from or by wajib. Sadara anhu jami'u ma ada. Everything other than wajib. Min al mumkinat. This min is what we call it min bayaniyah. It explains. Ma ada means mumkinat. Ma adahu min al mumkinat. Okay? Min al mumkinat explains ma ada. Anything other than wajib. Other than wajib is what? Mumkinat. So all the mumkinat are issued from wajib. Okay? وإليه الإشارة في التنزيل. In the Quran, there is a hint. There is indication for this argument. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أولم يكف بربك أنه على كل شيء شهيد أولم يكف بربك أنه على كل شيء شهيد. Doesn't this suffice, or doesn't your Lord suffice as a witness? So God is witness for himself. You don't need to argue from stars, from camel, from flowers for the existence of God. You look at God himself and argue for his existence. But how we look at God? Through the concept of wajibul wujud. So from concept of wajibul wujud, we argue for the existence of God. Of course, technically, this is not 100% directly from God, because you started from wujud, which is mumkin and wujud. But at least you didn't need to look at the world around you. So if someone has not seen anything around, still can use this argument, even if he has not seen himself. Okay. والمصنف ذكر في هذا الباب. If you can tell me what is this bab, it means that you understood. Bab means Bab Hadi Ashar. Not here, not this chapter, the whole book. Our Musannif, our author, writer, Allama Hilli, has mentioned these two types in this book, in Bab Hadi Ashar. The first one, which is the argument from Athar, like Ibrahim al-Khalil, where later when we talk about God being powerful, omnipotent, in the إثبات كونه قادرا, when Allah Hilli wants to argue that God has the quality of power, قدرة, he uses this argument. He argues from existence of this world to say that God has power. Okay? But the second argument from wujub and imkan, it's mentioned here for existence of God. الثاني فهو المذكور هنا is mentioned here.
What does he mean when his?
Hona means here.
In this
His
chapter.
commentary, I mean? Or
No, means
This chapter.
discussion about the existence of God.
Okay.
In Fasl Awwal, first chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is first chapter. وَتَقْرِيرُهُ. Okay, now let's explain the second argument. Okay? What is the second argument? The second type of argument?
Looking at existence.
Wujub and imkan. Yeah? So now he wants to explain what we had it last week. Everything that we discussed last week, now he's expanding. There is nothing new. Okay? Unless you have forgotten. You know, once people said, an alim, that mashallah you have great knowledge. You have been giving us lecture for 20, 30 years and you mashallah always say new things. He says, I don't say you new thing, you keep forgetting. Otherwise my knowledge is not that much. So, if it is new for you, it's because you have forgotten. So, أما الثاني فهو المذكور هنا. It's mentioned here in this chapter about the existence of God. وَتَقْرِيرُهُ. تَقْرِير. What does تَقْرِير mean? Several times we had. تَقْرِير means to explain, to give an account of something. تَقْرِير. تَقْرِيرات, you know, we say, for example, we say تَقْرِيرات usul of Sheikh Naini. Like Ayatollah Khoui has تَقْرِيرات usul of Sheikh Naini. تقريره أن نقول is to say this لو لم يكن الواجب تعالى موجودا. If واجب الوجود, necessary existence, didn't exist, if he had not existed, we want to use Burhan Khulf. We say, suppose wajibul wujud was not there. Let's see what are the implications. If it's acceptable, we say, okay, wajibul wujud doesn't exist. But if there are implications that you cannot accept, then you have to go and change your assumption. What was your assumption? That wajibul wujud doesn't exist. So if you assume wajibul wujud doesn't exist, then this requires implications which are not acceptable. You have to change and say, okay, wajibul wujud exists. We say, لو لم يكن الواجب تعالى موجودا. If wajib, the Almighty was not there, was not existent, lazima, it implies one of the two. Either door or tasalsul. Either leads to vicious circle or endless regression. وَاللَّازِمُ بِقِسْمَيْهِ بَاطِلٌ. وَاللَّازِمُ بِقِسْمَيْهِ بَاطِلٌ. What does it mean? وَاللَّازِمُ بِقِسْمَيْهِ بَاطِلٌ.
Both Dawr and Tasalsul are batil.
What is implied? Lazim means what is implied, the implication. What is implied in both scenarios, both types, is false. Whether door or tasalsul, both of them are batil. So, if God, if wajibul wujud does not exist, either you have to accept door or tasalsul, both of them are rejected. So then you have to change your first assumption, which was non-existence of wajibul wujud. So you have to say wajibul wujud exists. Okay?
You said door is circle, the best translation.
Yes. وَاللَّازِمُ بِقِسْمَيْهِ بَاطِلٌ. What is implied in both types, in both options is false, then فالملزوم, then what implies them should be also batil. If A requires B and B is batil, so A must be batil. Okay? Anything which requires or implies batil, it's batil. So what is lazim and what is malzoom? These are two terms that we use many times. Many times we use in the Hose text this term. Lazim, malzoom.
Like sun and the light.
What is lazim, what is malzoom?
Sun is lazim and light is malzoom.
The thing implied is malzoom.
No. Lazim is what is implied. Malzoom is what implies. Sun is malzoom.
Malzoom and light is lazim.
Light is lazim. Okay? Non-existence of God is malzoom. Dor and tasalsul are two lazim. And when these two lazim are batil, so malzoom, which is non-existence of God, is batil. Because this implied them. This implied them. So what has implied batil has to be batil. Pardon?
Subsequent implication. How would you say it in English?
For what?
Malzoom.
Malzoom is what implies. What implies. So, A implies B. Sun implies light. So sun is malzoom and yalzamuhu light. So light is lazim. Malzoom, lazim. It's fa'ilu maf'ul, but it's opposite because malzoom is fa'il. Yes?
File
Because malzoom is the basis
file mu'akhar.
and this comes. So this implies that.
So Sheikh, can you explain around الدور والتسلسل? Still is not very clear for me.
Pardon?
Can you explain around the الدور أو
No,
التسلسل?
we have not yet explained. We are just starting very slowly.
Okay.
So now we don't talk about dur and tasalsul. After a few minutes we talk about them. Just remember these things. Malzoom and lazim. Malzoom is something that implies another thing. So if this is there, A leads to B. So B is lazim. This is malzoom.
Is malzoom.
Sun implies light or heat. So sun,
Malzoom.
malzoom, and light and heat are lazim. Non-existence of wajibul wujud is malzoom. It implies one of the two. Either door or tasalsul. Both of them are batil. Why it implies these two, we will explain now.
Actually, Sheikh, this lazim malzoom can actually turn as well. I say, when there is sun, lazim there is light. And as well I can say, when there is light, lazim there is sun or something which is shining this light. So actually, lazim malzoom is somehow...
Even I thought that
Yeah,
the other way around.
that is what we call mulazama. Sometimes there is mulazama, okay? Therefore, A requires B, B requires A. But in this case, there is no mulazama. When there is sun, there is light. But when there is light, there doesn't need to be sun. Maybe there's electricity. So here there is no mulazama. But sometimes there can be mulazama. So A requires B, and whenever B is there, also A must be there. And this is what we call burhan lemmi and burhan enni. Sometimes from cause we go to effect, sometimes from effect we go to the cause. Burhan lemmi and burhan enni. Just keep it somewhere in your mind. You don't need to understand now. Inshallah, the time comes. Everything, alhamdulillah, is coming. We have very good, menu for you. Okay. فالملزوم وهو عدم الواجب مثله في البطلان. So, malzoom has to be batil. So, now we need to explain two things for you. فيحتاج هنا. There is need. يحتاج means there is need. Okay? Not يحتاج. يحتاج is majhul. يحتاج إلى means there is need for explaining two things. One is بيان لزوم الدور والتسلسل. Why, if wajibul wujud is not there, it leads to dor and tasalsul? Why there is such implication? We have to explain for you. Why this implies dor and tasalsul. And the second thing, why dor and tasalsul are batil. Okay? But if we prove for you that this leads to dor and tasalsul, and dor and tasalsul are batil, then you understand that wajibul wujud must exist. Okay? So, now let's start with the first one. Why this assumption leads to dor or tasalsul. أما بيان الأمر الأول. أمر الأول, what is أمر الأول? Why it leads to dor or tasalsul. فهو, this is the bayan, this is the explanation. أنها هنا ماهيات. Actually, it should be mahiyaten, but it's okay. Because hona is not khabar, it's not es. But no problem. There are mahiyat. Mahiyat is plural for mahiya. Mahiya means, you can say, nature, quiddity, whatness, essences. Basically, whatever is contingent is mahiya, has mahiya. There are realities, or you can say there are natures, there are essences, there are quiddities. متصفة بالوجود الخارجي بالضرورة. Mahiya can exist and cannot exist. But without any doubt, there are mahiyat which exist. Yeah? Me, you, this book, table, these are mahiyat which exist. Okay? But there are also many mahiyat which don't exist. Okay? Although they are mumkin. For example, here there could be an elephant. This elephant is mahiya and is mumkin, but doesn't exist. Okay? It's not impossible to have elephant here. But it doesn't exist. So, أنها هنا ماهيات متصفة بالوجود الخارجي بالضرورة. بالضرورة means obviously, it's self-evident. So, this is the first assumption we always had, that there is no doubt. We said لا شك أن هنا موجودا. There are realities outside. Okay. إن كان الواجب موجودا معها فهو المطلوب. If along with these mumkinat which exist, there is also a wajibul wujud, alhamdulillah, this is matlub, this is what we were seeking, this is what we wanted to establish. If someone says, in the world we don't have any wajib, everything is mahiyat mumkinah, everything is contingent. وَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ مَوْجُودًا. If wajib al-wujud is not mawjud, wajib al-wujud doesn't exist, everything is mumkin. يَلْزَمُ اشْتِرَاكُهَا بجملتها في الإمكان. Then, if everything was mumkin, then it implies that the jumlataha, all of them together also would be contingent. If 1,000 or 1 million or 1 billion mumkin is there, then all together is also mumkin. By putting these things together, you are not able to solve the problem. Okay? Does it look new or is the same thing?
No, it's the same.
The same thing we said last week.
The bread one.
Last week.
آفرين. فإن كان Okay. إن كان الواجب موجودا معها فهو المطلوب. إن لم يكن means إن لم يكن الواجب. If واجب is not موجود يلزم اشتراكها بجملتها في الإمكان. Then all these ممكنات together also are ممكن, contingent. Why? إذ لا واسطة بينهما. Because we don't have any third possibility. If it is not wajib, has to be mumkin. You cannot say it's not wajib and it is not mumkin. There is no third option. فلا بد لها من مؤثر حينئذ بالضرورة. So when all of them are mumkin, then we need what? We need mu'athir, we need a cause, an originator, a creator that has brought them into existence. Okay? فَمُؤَثِّرُهَا. Not that cause. We move to that cause, that mu'athir. فَمُؤَثِّرُهَا. Ha refers to what?
All the
This jumlatul mumkinat, all the mumkinat together, mu'athir, the cause for them, the originator for them. إن كان واجبا. If you say that is wajib, فهو المطلوب. وإن كان ممكنا, you say no, even that is mumkin. You say okay, this mumkin then needs mu'athir. افتقر إلى مؤثر. فمؤثرها. Again this mu'athir. Okay? If it is the first mumkin, which is door. إن كان مؤثرها إن كان ما فرضناه أولا. If the cause is what we assumed in the first place. So the mumkin needed mu'athir. And if the mu'athir also needs mu'athir, and the second mu'athir is the first mumkin, which needed the first mu'athir. So A needed B, and the mu'athir for B is A. This is door. Yes? Even if you are very tired and sleepy, you can understand that this door is button.
Very clear.
Yes?
Very clear.
Yes. إن فمؤثرها إن كان ما فرضناه أولا لزم الدور. If it is the same thing that we assume the first place becomes door. It implies door, vicious circle. وإن كان ممكنا آخر غيره. If A needs mu'athir, which is B. B needs a mu'athir, which is C. And C is also mumkin, then C also needs mu'athir. Either then you bring it back to these ones, becomes door, or you want to continue, it becomes tasalsul. وإن كان ممكنا افتقر إلى مؤثر فمؤثرها إن كان ما فرضناه أولا لزم الدور. وإن كان ممكنا آخر غيره ننقل الكلام إليه. We shift the discussion to that second mu'athir. And we say, is it wajib? We say, no, it is mumkin. Then we say, okay, the fourth mu'athir. We carry on. then becomes silent. So we have to prove to them that they cannot make us tired. And say, okay, because sometimes people are tired, say, okay, whatever you say, we accept.
Yes.
We say to these people, we don't become tired. Even if you want to take this, for 1 year, we are not accepting. So then, they have to surrender. فَقَدْ بَانَ لُزُومُهُمَا. What does it mean? فَقَدْ بَانَ لُزُومُهُمَا.
It has become clear.
Bana yabino means become clear.
Clear.
So luzumu homa means what? Dor and tasalsul. So it became clear why dor and tasalsul are implied.
What does Luzumuha mean?
Pardon?
Luzumuha?
Luzum means to be implied. Because we said there are two things that we have to prove for you. One is how non-existence of wajib implies these two. Alhamdulillah, this is now clear. The second thing is why these two have problem. Did we show how non-existence of God leads to Dor and Tasalsul?
Yes.
We showed? Okay. So now, why Dor and Tasalsul are batil? This is the second thing that we promised you to discuss. Yes?
So Dor and Tasalsul, they are the same, right? One
No.
concept.
They are not the same.
So one is circular, one is
Regression.
yeah. But where is the difference? I don't understand. Maybe I didn't catch it.
Dor
So
means,
A needs B, B needs C, and C needs D, and so
this is
on.
Tasalsul.
Okay.
Dor is A needs B and B needs A.
Uh-huh.
Or A needs B, B, C, and then C, A. So sometimes circle is smaller or bigger, but you have to
Right. Okay.
go around and reach the first point.
So it's on each other, dependent on each other.
Uh-huh.
Whereas Tasalsul is one after the other.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
But sorry, Sheikh, I don't understand the last meaning. فَقَدْ بَانَ لُزُومَهُمَا.
Uh-huh. So it became clear why non-existence of wajib implies dor or tasalsul.
Non-existence of wajib.
Okay?
So it means if there is no wajib, it should mean...
If there's no wajib, the consequences is what? Dor or tasalsul. Dor or tasalsul are not acceptable, so we should change the position. What was the position? Non-existence of wajib. When what you have assumed as your position, as your mawzi' has false consequences or implications, then it means that you have to change. This is very rational, yeah? Sometimes we prove something directly, sometimes we say, suppose what we want to prove is not correct, what you say is correct, but then we show that if we accept what he says has false consequences, false implications, then he has to change. Okay? Amma bayanul amr thani. We said we have to do two things for you. One is to show that there is mulazima of dor and tasalsul. The second is dor and tasalsul are batil. So now we want to tell you why dor and tasalsul are batil. Okay? Don't accept anything without reason. Accept with reason. We promise to give you reason. أما الدور فهو عبارة عن توقف الشيء على ما يتوقف عليه. Who can translate this?
I've got the translation here, so I'm not going to do it.
The dependence of something on what it depends on.
توقف الشيء, dependence of something. For example, say A. Shay, the first shay is A. dependence of A on something which depends on A. A depends on something like B which depends on A. I depend on something which depends on me. So I'm not getting anywhere. Yes? If A depends on B and B depends on A, so A cannot go anywhere. Yes? الدور هو عبارة عن توقف الشيء على ما يتوقف عليه. If you don't translate it as I say, you will get confused. Because then you think that both of them are the same thing. توقف الشيء على ما يتوقف. This fa'il for يتوقف is ma. And alay, that har goes back to the first shay. So you can put A and B like this. توقف الشيء. Put A under or top of shay. على ما. B. Ma is B. يتوقف. That B alay A. So A depends on B, which depends on A. This is door. Like يتوقف ألف على ب وب على ألف. وهو باطل بالضرورة. This is باطل. Why it is باطل? is يلزم منه أن يكون الشيء الواحد موجودا ومعدوما معا. Because this means that the single thing A has to exist and not exist. It's more. Why it has to exist and not exist? Because if A depends on B, it means that without B, A is not there. But then B depends on A, it means that A is there so that B is there. So when A wants to come to existence, it has to be already existing. Because A depends on B and B on A. So something depends on itself. And being, if something is between A and itself doesn't solve the problem. If I say A is created by A, you say no, it's ridiculous. So this is also ridiculous. A is created by B and B by A. Just there is a gap here. This gap doesn't solve the problem. It's actually worse. Because this means that this depends on itself after a gap. This is making it worse. يلزم من أن يكون الشيء الواحد موجودا ومعدوما معا. Okay? وهو محال. And this is impossible, that something exists and doesn't exist. Why? We finish this sentence and then we stop if you are tired. If you are not tired, I can finish the second paragraph. But at least please let's finish this paragraph. وذلك لأنه إذا توقف ألف على با. If A depends on B, كان الألف متوقفا على B or با وعلى جميع ما يتوقف عليه با. If A depends on B, it means A depends on B and whatever B depends on it. Okay? So whatever is the cause for B is also important. So if Aleph depends on B, it means Aleph depends on B and on whatever B depends on it. Whatever B depends on, not whatever depends on B, whatever B depends on it. وَمِن جُمْلَةِ مَا يَتَوَقَّفُ عَلَيْهِ B. And among those things that B depends on it is what? is A itself. So A has dependent on B and B has dependent on A, so it means that A has dependent on itself. وَالْمَوْقُوفُ عَلَيْهِ مُتَقَدِّمٌ عَلَى الْمَوْقُوفِ. What is dependent on precedes what depends on it. Okay? So B precedes A. Pardon? You are confused?
Yeah.
Why?
A depends on B,
Okay.
Everything B depends on.
and everything that B depends on.
Which is
Now, if B depends on A, then B depends on everything that A depends on. So how is A dependent on itself then?
No, A depends on B.
Yeah.
And if B also depends on A,
Right.
so it means that A has dependent on B and whatever B depends on it, which is A also, so A has dependent on itself.
Thank you.
Yes?
Very clear.
Yes.
Explain again, please.
Pardon?
Explain it again, please.
A depends on B and B depends, say, on A. This is door. So now the problem is this. When A depends on B, it depends on B and whatever B depends on it. Okay? You depend on your father and you depend on your grandfather because your father depends on your grandfather. Now imagine if you are grandfather of yourself.
He is actually.
This is door. And to be grandfather of yourself is worse than being father of yourself. This is why I told you, they are not solving the problem or reducing the problem. By bringing something in between, they think they can hide. But they cannot hide, it becomes worse. Is it clear?
Yes, it's very clear.
If you tell A depends on B and B on C, you are not solving the problem. Okay. So, shall I repeat the sentence? وَذَلِكَ, I repeat it. لأنه إذا توقف Aleph or A, I say A and B just for convenience. إذا توقف A on B, كان A dependent on B and whatever B depends on it. And one of the things that B depends on it is A. So it means that A has dependent on itself. فيلزم توقفه على نفسه. والموقوف عليه متقدم على الموقوف. So A has dependent on itself and what is dependent on should be before. So something has to be before itself. Yes?
What does jumla mean?
Jumla means whole. Whole.
What's it? Jumla means?
Whole. Jumla means the whole thing. فيلزم تقدمه على نفسه والمتقدم من حيث إنه متقدم يكون موجودا قبل المتأخر. What is preceding, okay, has to be before what comes later. So A has to be before itself. So it means that A has to be there because we need it. And A has not to be there because A depends. When what depends and what is dependent on are the same, so the problem is that in one level we need it, and in another level it has to be not there. So it's contradiction. And then there is tasalsul. Maybe it's enough, maybe.
Yes. I think it's very good. Excellent.
I don't want to
It's excellent. Thank you.
make you tired.
Excellent.
I think the idea is not very difficult, but maybe the text and Arabic. But you are, mashallah, learning very well. Because if you can, inshallah, read this text and understand it in 2-3 months, you have made a big jump.
Inshallah.
Inshallah ta'ala.
You know, in Persian we say waqian.
Yes. Inshallah. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الله.